a fantastic webinar with our special speaker today, and I will be introducing him to you shortly. And my name is Murat Kasira. I'm the Director of Controlled Environment Agriculture Center, and joining me, Ellen Ward, our Program Coordinator, and as well as Dave Bogner, the Director of the Cyber Systems and Communications at the College of Agricultural Life Sciences. Before I introduce our speaker today, I would like to share with you some exciting events that are coming up as we are organizing our hydroponics tomato intensive workshop. This is a 3-day on-site and online workshop, and our instructor, Dr. Tristan Hoax, will be offering this intensive workshop. We are excited to have him. He recently joined us here at the Controlled Environment Agriculture Center team. And if you're interested in learning about growing tomatoes hydroponically, I encourage you to join us for this exciting workshop. You can see the registration link here, as well as the email for Ellen if you have any questions. The seats will be limited for that event. We are also organizing our 21st annual Greenhouse Production and Engineering Design short course, and this will be an online and on-site event hybrid, again with limited seats, about 40-50 seats available here at the Controlled Environment Agriculture Center classroom. Please join us again for this short course. So with that, we are delighted to have our speaker today with you, Dr. Matt Lingard, and he's the Vice President of Agriculture and Science for BrightFarms, where he leads teams focused on developing new and innovative methods for growth of leafy greens in controlled environments. Before joining to BrightFarms, Matt was the lead of Bayer Crop Science Marana, Arizona Product Design Center, which is a flagship automated greenhouse facility supporting Bayer's strategy of producing improved corn varieties. He has also led teams at Monsanto focused on developing automated genotyping workflows, automated microscopy, and high throughput cell-based assays. Matt earned his PhD at Arizona State University in plant cell biology, and he was a postdoctoral researcher at Rice University studying plant genetics. Please, our participants, have your questions in the Q&A window during the presentation. I'll be doing my best to present those questions to our speaker. Please, we look forward to your active participation. Matt, pleasure to have you with us. Stage is yours.
Oh, Murat, thank you for the kind introduction. Let me get my slides going here. Here we go. All right. I am just so delighted to be here. This is, if you were listening to what Murat was reading off, I have deep ties to Arizona. In particular, I actually still live here in Tucson, and I was really looking forward to actually coming to the seminar room and seeing that beautiful popcorn ceiling one more time for the seminar. And then Murat told me that we were going to be all online, and that's good. What I can at least say is that I'm using electrons that are sourced out of Tucson, Arizona, and I'm actually right here local today. So as Murat said, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing at BrightFarms. But before I did that, I wanted to first start with just an expression of gratitude for Murat and Gia Kameli in particular. I think in a lot of ways, my real career induction into controlled environment growing came as we collaborated with Murat and with Jean at the University of Arizona. And so it's really an honor for me to be able to come back to this group and in some ways reflect back some of what I've learned over the years in working with those two fine gentlemen. Because this is a graduate seminar, I always like to kind of start with how did I get to where I'm at? Because when I was in graduate school, it wasn't always clear what I was going to do with myself, and I was always interested in hearing other people's stories. And so I'll spend just a minute talking about me, and then we'll get to the really interesting stuff, which is the greens that we grow at BrightFarms. I have a bachelor's degree in botany. I got it in Utah, and I was really interested in ethno-medicinal plants, and so that's me wearing a bandana in Guatemala, thinking about medicinal plants. I went to Arizona State University and studied plant cell biology. So I worked with plant cell cultures. I did a lot of microscopy, spent many hours in dark rooms just trying to tease apart the molecular mechanisms of how peroxisomes function. But I felt like I was missing out on something. What I really felt like I was missing out on was genetics. There's this thing happening where you could take a Arabidopsis and learn things about how the plants work on the inside. And so I went to Rice University and with Dr. Barney Bartel studied Arabidopsis. And for those who don't know, Arabidopsis is a little weed. It's like yay big, and it loves to grow in petri dishes. And it's the mouse of the plant world. And so I studied some more peroxisome biology then. It was about that time I also realized that I wasn't, like, a professor wasn't the career path that was going to work for me. I thought I was on that path, and just a variety of different things kind of led me to say, I need to look for alternative career paths. And kind of all along this way, I wasn't great at finding mentors. And so I always felt like I was feeling my way in the dark. And so I just started blindly applying to different places to try to find something interesting to do in the applied space. And Monsanto was looking for cell biologists, specifically for cell biologists who knew how to do exactly the stuff that I knew how to do. And so I applied and I got hired, and I started a really wonderful chapter in my career. I spent 9 years in Chesterfield, Missouri, studying plant cells, so cell biology. And then I got into automation and robotics. It led me to high throughput thinking, which led me into the genotyping space, where I was able to start thinking about how we, instead of always using fields to drive breeding and to drive breeding gains in yield, can we do it in the lab and do it in a way that's much more, that uses many fewer resources than always testing in the field. And then that led me to Tucson. So it brought me back to Arizona, and it brought me to what I found to be a much nicer city than Tucson, and a university that I really enjoyed working with, in University of Arizona, and on a project that I love with all my heart. So we built a greenhouse in Marana. And if you'd asked this guy who's got his bandana on, are you ever going to like work in a greenhouse? There's no way you can make a career out of that stuff. And I just couldn't imagine being where I was at that time. Spent a long time building the greenhouse, maybe a little longer than any of us would have wanted, but eventually we opened a greenhouse to help breed corn. And what I realized as I went through that is that I wasn't ready to be done with greenhouses, that this was a movement that was transforming the way that we think about agriculture in the world today. There's so much effort, there's so much energy, there's so many beautiful things happening in this greenhouse space. And I wanted to get deeper into that. And so that's when I moved over to BrightFarms. And so I moved from leading the greenhouse in Tucson to leading a complex of greenhouses in about 6 different locations with BrightFarms, where I head up our agricultural operations as well as our research and development operations. And so what I'll do now is enough about me. What I want to talk about is why are we doing what we're doing? Why grow in greenhouses? Why do we think that lettuce that's grown in Yuma and lettuce that's grown in California might work a little better if it were grown in areas that are adjacent to the places where the food's going to be consumed? And BrightFarms has been around longer than the pandemic. So BrightFarms has been around for about 10 years. But the pandemic really drove a sea change in the way that consumers think about purchasing. It's really been fascinating to observe how this global pandemic drove a greater appreciation for local. A lot of times we talk about fight or flight responses, and like when you're stressed, you're going to punch somebody in the face, you're going to turn around and run away really quickly. There's another stress response that's less well known, and I like it a little better. And this is in times of turmoil, oxytocin can be released in the bloodstream, creating an urge to build social networks and nurture those nearby. This tend and befriend response is an alternative to the fight or flight mode. And it was something beautiful that we saw during the very tough years, early months of the pandemic. And that started showing up in the way that consumers buy food. And so 44% of Americans made an effort to support local restaurants. I remember well the early days of the pandemic when we couldn't go out to eat. So many of us were getting takeout from local restaurants, especially here in Tucson, to support our hardworking local food economy. And not only that, like when we were working on the Bear project in Marana, we were specifically trying to source a lot of our food for our team from local farmers to support what was happening in a local way. This is a trend that plays itself out all across America right now, and even across the world, and that shows up in the data. And so tomorrow's consumer doesn't just want local. They don't just want to get it from nearby, but they also want to do it with an eye towards solving really big global problems. And so it's not just about sourcing local. That's a big part of it, but it's really only about half of it. It's about how can I source local, and how can I do something that's better for the planet, better for my family, and you know, maybe happens to be better tasting along the way. And that's really where BrightFarms, I think, shines. And so what we're doing at BrightFarms is we're transforming agriculture with a local and conscious approach to the way that we produce lettuce. And you know, I think a lot of you are aware that there was a major shift in tomato production about 15 or 20 years ago, where most of it was field grown, and there was this drive to get it indoors, to get a little more local. And we see the same thing happening in lettuce today. And one of the things that's really cool about it is when you drive this local shift, it's actually creating shifts in the dynamics, not only the way we grow, but the way we consume as well. And so what we're trying to do is build a connected network of indoor farms. And so I mentioned we have 6 farms today. We think we'll be more like 11 or 12 within the next 2 or 3 years. And we're really trying to specialize. So we're not trying to be everything for everyone. We're really specialized on leafy greens, and we've got narrower and narrower even in that focus, to where we talk about our fresh 5. We only want to have about 5 different types of greens that we grow, so that we can get really good at those and focus in on them. And so you can see a couple of examples of what that looks like here, where you're looking at some of the different views of the spinach that we grow in some of our greenhouses. And so what we want to do is create cleaner, fresher greens that are available 365 days a year and are freshly and locally sourced 365 days a year. And so, you know, that's all kind of the marketing stuff, and it's also the real stuff. Like everybody who works at BrightFarms is here for this mission, and that happens in a really real and natural way. What I do want to spend most of my time talking about today, though, is the technology that we use. So this is a controlling environment seminar. I want to share how we're growing at BrightFarms. It's not going to be at a super deep technical level. It's going to be like almost more at kind of a tour level, but to illustrate what growing means to us and where we see the future of growing going from here. And so it starts with obsession. So I think all growers, all people who care about plants are obsessed in one way or another. And at BrightFarms, we're really obsessed with a couple of key areas. And specifically so we can provide a nurturing environment for our baby greens that we grow. And so the first obsession that we have is with germination. So I'll talk a little bit about germination as we get into this, but making sure that those seedlings get the right kickstart in life so that they can grow to be the highest quality and freshest and most delicious greens they can possibly be. As they get older, we get obsessed with water, and how do we make sure we've got the best water? It's nutritionally balanced. Also, it has the right balance in the ecology point of view and the right ways of circulating and aerating and these types of things. And so we spend just a tremendous amount of time thinking about water. You know, kind of amusing side anecdote. The thing I did not anticipate when I started my journey into greenhouse operation is just how much of a dominant player water would be in my life. Not only how you get good water for the ponds, but what do you do with wastewater, and how do you manage that sustainably? I'm not going to talk a lot about that today, but it's fun. It's sometimes just funny to pause and think about things that like you don't get trained for. Like nobody trained me in how to deal with wastewater, and yet you know, it's one of these things. It can end up consuming the majority of your time. And so I think that's the fun part about doing this stuff that's still kind of on the cutting edge. So we've got water at the root level, and then at the shoot level climate, and making sure that we're managing the climate really well, not only to help the plants grow, but to help them grow at a high quality. If climate isn't managed well, it's going to show up in things like tip burn. It's going to show up in things like wilting and stunted or bolted plants. And so getting that climate really dialed in is something that's frankly really hard, and something that I think needs a lot more attention going forward in terms of how do we assist growers in managing that in a little more of an automated way. And then probably the biggest surprise for me as I moved into out of seed production into food production space is the dominant role that food safety plays. And it makes complete sense once I've been in the space and thinking about it, but we're providing a fresh leafy green that has a shelf life of about 2 weeks. And if it's not of the highest quality, then it's not going to last as long. And so what we have, and it might even potentially make people sick. And so our company is laser focused on food safety. We've learned a lot over the years. We have a lot more that we can still learn, and I'll talk more about what that looks like going forward. But these are the cleanest greenhouses I've ever seen in my career. All right, so digging into a couple of these different areas. First we're going to talk about what technologies do we use? So BrightFarms is typically known as a deep water culture company. For as long as we've been a company, so for about 10 years and really 7 since we built our first greenhouse, we've grown in deep water culture, and that's what's shown on the left there. 5 of our farms are deep water culture, and I think we're really good at it. I think we're some of the best in the world at it. However, we want to choose the technologies that match the outcomes we want to achieve. And the outcomes that we're specifically looking for are sustainable technologies that produce healthy greens that can be grown in a local market. A lot of what the data are showing us today is mobile gutter systems are a really effective way of growing leafy greens. And so we recently acquired Leaf Farms in New Hampshire, which is a farm that's about an acre running mobile gutter systems. And we're in pretty deep conversations with some greenhouse vendors about what would it look like to get totally into mobile gutters and in effect really a complete transformation in the way we grow today. And so one of the things I love about working at BrightFarms is we're not wedded to a certain way of doing things. We're wedded to our mission. And that mission, again, is to bring healthy, fresh greens to local communities. And so what I'll talk about for the next 20 minutes or so as my kids are coming home from school and the dogs start barking. So apologies for that. But what I'll talk about is the different technologies that we use at BrightFarms and just give some pretty high level examples of those. And specifically, I'll talk a little bit more about ponds. Genetics are such a passion of mine and something that I think needs a lot more attention in this space. How we manage climate, lighting, pests, post-harvest physiology is this whole like brave new world for me of what makes something wilt faster than something else, and let's get to the physiology of that, and then specifically some of the stuff that we're doing in the food safety arena. So first thing I'll talk about is germination. When I give tours and we walk into our germination rooms, my colleague in our operations space will walk in and say, "This is the most boring room in the greenhouse." And then I look quite offended when he says that, because from my point of view, this is where the magic happens. If we get this right, if we get right what happens at sowing, at germination and transplant, it's only like 3 days of the plant's life, but it's at least 50% of the outcome of what the crop is going to look like. And so we're just obsessed with getting this germination stuff right. And we did a lot of stuff wrong over the years. We've learned through a lot of trial and error. This board design you see on the left, this is a custom board design. It's our 2nd generation board. And that's dramatically improved the way our seeds germinate. We've gone from, believe it or not, like sheetrock germination rooms that got moldy and fell apart within 6 months to really quite nice Conviron style germination rooms that are built at scale. And so this is what a germination cabinet might look like in a research lab that's specifically designed to manage the temperature, the humidity. We pump ozone at night into these germination rooms to make sure that they're nice and sterile, so we can manage pathogens at the germination stage effectively as possible. And after a certain time spent in a germination room, that time's going to vary based on the variety of seed that we plant and the time of year sometimes. But after that time, we put it onto the pond, and this, we get these little seedlings, and in this case, these are basil seedlings, which are about my favorite seedlings in the planet. And if we're doing it right, it doesn't look quite like this. I don't want to see any media on the board. And so we think about the different media types that we can use that stick together well, they're still easy to pull out, and also create a really robust little nursery bed for those seedlings to germinate in. And those boards they're just like 3/4 of an inch thick. And so it's just really a place to get started. And then the roots are going to be all growing down into the water media, like you saw on the board on an earlier slide, on the previous slide that I showed. So this guy right here, where this is what the seeds would look like, or the roots would look like growing down into the water. Okay, so just one more slide on growing in deep water culture. This is what our system looks like. And so our ponds, and it's also behind me in the picture, I like to compare them to an Olympic-sized swimming pool. They hold about 100,000, 110,000 gallons of water. They're about 18 inches deep, and they're 3 lanes wide, and each lane is 5 boards wide. And the way that we manage maturation of the plant is we put all the boards in on this end, so the transplant end of the pond, and then we are harvesting as we're putting new boards in from this end, or the harvest end of the pond. And so we pull 5 boards out. We use just actually a modified piece of PVC piping. We bought some expensive board pushers that were hydraulic and stuff. They actually work terribly. So we use just big PVC pipes in a T shape to push these down, put more boards in, and we just keep pushing them down. And as we harvest more, it pushes the younger plants towards the mature end, and eventually those plants are the most mature plants in the pond, and we harvest them. We'll get, so these boards are about 2 foot by 3 foot long, and we'll get anywhere from 20 to 100 ounces, depending on the variety that we grow on a board. And so then, like humans, this isn't as automated as we'd like to see it right now. we have humans pulling those boards out and putting them onto conveyors, and I'll show that in a little bit. We spend a lot of time talking about our challenges in this space. And so for anybody who's worked with lettuce, tip burn is a huge problem. So tip burn is basically on the edge of a leaf, it'll turn brown, particularly if the climate or the air movement's wrong. And it's a calcium deficiency that can be a result of any number of things. The other thing that plagues us in lettuce, and this is where I think genetics could actually help us even a little bit, is things like bolting. And so if it's a little too hot, or if there's not quite enough light, the seedlings will either start to bolt or they'll stretch. And the stretching is a chlorosis response. There's not quite enough light. Bolting is a stress response. They're starting to try and flower, and we really don't want that, because like if you think about a salad, you don't want thick, like bolty stems in there. You just want the leaves in your salad. And so we work with our growers to help them pull levers to manage this. And it's, this, as anybody who's done this knows, this isn't a set it and forget it kind of situation. It's got to be continually tweaked, especially given the current state of technology and climate control automation today. And so what our growers think a lot about in this space is sowing density. So in this board right here, how many seeds per furrow are you going to put there? If it's really, really hot, we tend to put fewer seeds, so maybe 2 or 3. And if it's like beautiful fall weather, then we're going to maybe put 5 or 6, depending on variety. The genetics, the growth cycle. So how many days are our seeds on the boards on the pond? It's going to be between 2 and 3 weeks, again, depending on the variety we grow. And then the climate. And you can see a nice mix of the varieties here. So we grow some red leaf lettuces. This is our favorite Sunny Crunch lettuce. It's like an iceberg in a little baby leaf. And then our favorite thing to hate to love to grow is spinach. And so we grow a lot. We're the largest spinach grower, we think, in the world. And it's a very difficult crop to grow indoors. And a lot of our research and development effort is specifically focused on how do we make spinach not difficult. So genetics, so I spent 12 years in a seed company, so genetics are near and dear to my heart. And so when we think about genetics, we think about a number of traits. And the current stuff we grow, like I love our lettuce, it's really good, and it's performing well in CEA. None of it was developed for CEA. They just kind of accidentally happened to work in CEA when we've gone to vendors and asked them to send us some of their seeds. So there's a lot of room for improvement in the genetic space. And it's something I like, even though there's been some new people coming into the space, it's a place I'd like to see us go much, much faster in. But what we do is we get the varieties in, and then we test them for flavor, for texture, for architecture, so the shape of the plant, for shelf life, for disease resistance and nutrient content, among a host of other things. And so these are actually some pictures from some trialing we were doing about a month ago at our Washington, DC facility, and when I was out there. And so one of the types of lettuces we have is a more frilled lettuce. And so these are 2 different geometries of a frilled lettuce. So the ones we have are like the finger, like really thin frills on it. These ones are kind of interesting because they look almost fractal. And so you've got like rounded triangle tips. And this one has actually like they look like little spades on the edge of the leaf. So I don't know if they're good enough to sell, but they were sure fun to grow. And then red lettuces are, I think, really difficult to grow indoors. You have to have the right light to get good red color development. And so we're always looking for better red that doesn't need quite as much babying. Fun fact, sometimes we'll get a seed escape and it'll be growing like maybe outside on the sidewalk, and like you'll see these like beet red leaves that are just super, super dark. It's like the same thing as these guys, except because it's outside, it's getting all kinds of nice UV light. That UV light's triggering the anthocyanin production. It just gets so bright and red. And we look at, it's the same seed we're growing indoors, and we just can't quite drive the color because the glass does filter the UV out and doesn't quite give the signal. And so one of the things I'll talk about is like everybody else, we think a lot about LEDs, and can we use different wavelengths of LEDs to help drive the color generation in plants. But this variety here was meant to be a red variety, and you can hardly even tell. And so that like went right in the do not pass go bin. And this one also wasn't our favorite, but it was still fun to see it growing in our ponds. We do when we're testing varieties, we usually do what we call a 5-board trial. And so those boards again are 2 foot by 3 foot. We'll put 5 boards out of a given variety, and we'll just see how it performs in amongst our production material. Since we don't have dedicated trialing or R&D space today. So now switching topics and talking about climate management. So again, we're technology agnostic here. We actually have all Priva, Hugendorn, and Argus in a greenhouse right now, and we're fine with all of them. It can add a little complexity if I'm trying to send one grower to another site to support them, but again, different things made sense given different technology levels and different like economic situations or even technology states with the different vendors. And we kind of like them all. The one thing we are like really obsessive about is plant empowerment and making sure we're following plant empowerment principles in the way that we're steering our climate. And I'd give us like we're like freshmen in the plant empowerment space. We're certainly not seniors in terms of our abilities and our knowledge. And so we've got a lot to learn, but it's something that we get really excited about when we start thinking about how we can use the plants to steer the greenhouse instead of like steering, trying to match the plants to the greenhouse, for example. And then something I talk a lot about lately is how important automation is, especially in climate management. And it's not that I want, I'm not looking for autonomous climate management, but it's really difficult to bring a grower out of, say, college and put them in charge of a 4-acre greenhouse and say, good luck, make it work, right? Climate systems are really complex. There's a billion levers to manipulate inside of it. And where we see the industry moving right now is adding a little bit of automation. And so I think about this like self-driving cars, like today, climate management is a lot like you're almost like pushing all the levers and pistons and things inside of a car. I'd like it to be fully automated in the future, but like Elon Musk has been promising us that for 10 years and hasn't been able to deliver. But what he has given us is really cool. Like we've got radar assisted cruise control, lane keep assist, automated braking and accident avoidance. And I'd like to see some of that level of automation come through things like Let's Grow or other automation platforms to make it so that it's more like driving a car where you got maybe 5 or 6 inputs that you're managing: a steering wheel, brake pedal, gas, instead of, like you're actually the car and you're pushing all the levers and the pistons and stuff yourself. So we're starting to get much more involved, much more deeply invested in different types of data management systems for our company. And then lights. So we grow in greenhouses. We're not a vertical farming. We're not an indoor operation, but we do use supplemental lighting. And lights are big energy hogs. And as a sustainability focused company, we don't love that we need to use HPS lights everywhere. And so in our recent builds, we've moved to a blended system where we're using half LEDs and half HPS. And our sustainability mission, as our owners that are sustainability focused, as well as our sustainability branch from construction team, are really challenging the growing team to figure out how to get to 100% LED lights for any of our next builds, and even to retrofit all of our existing greenhouses, just because the energy footprint is so simply enormous. You guys won't ask this, but a lot of people ask, like, why are you adding supplemental light? You're in a greenhouse. And, of course, like we can actually, lettuce can have up to 20, 22 hours of light a day. And we don't get that in most places in the US. And so especially this time of year in the Midwest and on the East Coast, adding a lot of supplemental lighting definitely drives yield increases for us. But we're in the debate that everybody's in right now of like, what's the right wavelength, what's the right intensity. And in particular, like future-proofing it is the thing I worry about a lot, because these are large capital investments. And how do I make sure that I didn't make a mistake? Because I thought I wanted a lot of blue light to drive some architecture changes that turns out I hate because I switched genetics a couple of years from now. And that's a difficult conversation to have right now. Some of the challenges we face, and in particular in the deep water culture system that we work in, because that's what we worked in the most. The Achilles heel of a deep water system, it's actually pretty robust, but media accumulation is killer for us. And so media filters down out of the boards, and if you do that, if you don't clean your ponds out for a couple of years, you can have what you see on the bottom down here, which is just that mud is actually just media that's filtered out of the boards over a year or two in this pond. And we actually cleaned this pond out. And so this is what it should look like. It looks actually not like that swimming pool I was talking about, but this sediment is not great because it's actually covering our heat exchanger pipes here. So it's creating difficulties in chilling the pond. It also creates a refuge for plant pathogens and even for human pathogens. And so it's a thing that we feel a tremendous pressure to try to solve, or maybe move to gutters, because this is just not solvable. And frankly, when we think about that, and I don't know the answer to that, but these are the conversations that we're having today. And so I talk about it a little bit to illustrate like what it means to do development and research at BrightFarms, is to think about how we solve some of these big problems. And so a lot of them are engineering driven, and then others are genetics or growing driven. Aeration is something like if I have all my growers like to argue about their favorite aeration technology. So we use Venturi units. You can see here I have sites with species cones, and I have sites with nanobubbles. And I'm actually, I've forbidden anybody to mention what technology to use anymore, because I just want to manage to target, right? We want to grow at about normal like 9 to 10 ppm of oxygen in our water. That's easier with some technologies and harder with others for us. And I can't believe I'm saying that like 6 years in, we're still trying to figure that out, but that is the state today. And it's something that I think we can add a lot more rigor and discipline to the way that we manage. Bugs, so we grow pesticide free. When you think about eating fresh leafy greens, last thing anybody wants to eat on that is a bunch of pesticides. And so we use things like yellow sticky tape, we use beneficial insects, we use exclusion, so we're in a greenhouse. And we use the fact that this is a rapid turn crop. So again, 14 to 21 days. And so there's not time for most insects to set a growth cycle in there. And we do an effective job of managing pests. Some of our crops are really prone to disease. And so you can see what I'm guessing is some fusarium pressure on these boards here that's causing some crop circles. And, I'd say this is something that's ever present, but well managed, except for sometimes we have an outbreak. And then one of the things I've been impressed with at BrightFarms is the methods that have been developed to deal with those outbreaks when they might happen to appear. And then last thing I'll talk about kind of in the growing space is harvesting. And this is where we start to get a little bit outside of the grower world into the operations world. But most of the staff that we employ in our farms are not growers. Most of our farms have between 2 and 3 growers. And then we'll have between 20 and 40 harvest and packing crew. And so you can see some baby butter leaf here that's on a conveyor. So again, humans pick those up to put them on the conveyor, but then the conveyors themselves are automated. And then you can see this red leaf here moving into our harvest machine. And it's a bandsaw harvest machine. So there's this like scary saw blade that spins in circles, cuts the lettuce. Fresh lettuce moves up the conveyor, and then the board comes out the other end, and we have to pull out the roots and the shoots and the leftover media so that we can clean the boards. And just like I talked about being food safety focused, food safety starts with cleanliness. And so getting these boards clean, because we're reusing them, we don't want to just throw them away. So we get about a year of use out of every board. We have to have really robust cleaning processes. And so we have automation around how we do that. But it's an area that actually we still are really focused on, because our current automation is good, but not great in this space. So kind of starting to bring this to a close, because I definitely want to leave some time to question and answers. Not only are consumers saying they want to source local, sustainable food, produce leaders now, some major supermarkets in the US are embracing local indoor farming, and frankly, much faster than we anticipated. We thought that 3 or 4 years from now, we'd be getting a lot of pressure to move all lettuce indoor. Our conversations in the last 3 months have been, we want to move our entire category of salads to indoor farming and out of field farming. You can't do it today because you're not big enough, and we're 15 acres, 16 acres. And so they say, we want to work with you to come up with a plan for how we get that entire salad wall in the supermarket to be indoor grown. And that's really exciting. That's really exhilarating. And it's very much the sense in working in the space of being part of an agricultural movement that's transforming a fundamental part of our agricultural ecosystem. But to do that, we have to do it right. And the biggest piece of this that needs to come together and just be on point is food safety. And so BrightFarms, along with other members like Aero Farms, Bowery, and Revel, and Little Leaf, formed the CEA Food Safety Coalition. And this is about really recognizing there's a problem, which is that all of the food safety regulations that are written for leafy greens today are written with fields in mind. And they actually don't apply to very well. They don't fit very well with the way that we're growing indoors. We're a hybrid organization. We're a grower and we're a packager. And regulations are designed to fit one or the other. And I've had firsthand experience with regulators not necessarily knowing how to think about what it means when there's a problem in an indoor growing environment. And so part of the answer to that has been to come together as an industry and say, this is what we think food safety means. We're going to invest in getting better at it. We're going to invest in research so that we can be leaders in food safety and not lagging and being driven by external factors. And so one of the things that Murat Kassir and I have spent a little bit of time talking about is with the really great food safety thinking that exists at University of Arizona with the SEAC there and the greenhouses. I think universities and extensions can be a driving force in starting to define some of the parameters around what it means to define thresholds for different types of pathogens, for example, in pond water in a greenhouse or in water systems in a greenhouse. And so this has become really a passion of mine and something that we've moved the food safety team from our operations team and into our science team. Because so much of what we're doing in that space dovetails so beautifully with what we need to do in our food safety space as well. as I've said, we're passionate about reducing the environmental footprint of food. Moving indoors has a ton of benefits associated with it, and we're excited to be part of that movement. And we're looking for new ways to grow. So as I said, we're looking at new genetics, we look at new growing methods. We need new farmers. We need new people who want to come in and be what we call a bright farmer. And whether you're growing lettuce, whether you're in finance, whether you're in construction or engineering, you're a bright farmer if you're helping us figure out how to grow the best leafy greens in a fresh, sustainable way that we bring to local markets. So with that, I want to leave plenty of time for questions. So I think that's all the prepared content I have for today, but would love to hear from you guys. Because it's just simply not moving fast enough today. And breeding is not fast to begin with. And the considerations for indoor are slightly to dramatically different depending on kind of how you're thinking about it and require indoor trialing. I think we're seeing some of the Dutch seed vendors move in that direction, but I like it. If the shift that we think we see coming is really coming, and the majority of lettuce will be grown indoors, that's going to catch everybody in the seed space a little flat-footed, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Matt, thank you so much. This was wonderful. It was a pleasure to have you joining us today. Thank you for your time and what you're doing, what BrightFarm is doing. Congratulations again on your new role. We look forward to collaborating with you. I would like to also thank everyone, all of our participants, for your questions, for your time. Please join us again for the upcoming webinar that will be in November, mid-November. We will be announcing about it, and join us for the upcoming workshop in January, as well as the short course in March. Just checking in again with Ellen. Ellen, is there anything we are missing to mention before we leave our session today?
No, I think you covered it all. So
all right, wonderful. Thank you so much. And everyone, please have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, thank you for the invite. It's been wonderful. We'll catch you next time around.
Thank you, Matt. You take care.